What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Time to review another horror movie. Today I'm talking about the 1989 body horror classic, Society. So the movie was directed by Brian Yuzna and stars Billy Warlock as Bill Whitney. He comes from quite a wealthy family in Beverly Hills. He's the captain of the school basketball team, all of that sort of thing. He's really popular. But he just doesn't feel like he fits in with his family. They're very wealthy, upper class, part of the kind of social scene, so to speak. And he just doesn't feel like he's part of this at all. He feels like he's totally different to his family. He's seeing a therapist to try and deal with this, his paranoia and stuff, and try and help him feel like a part of the world around him, which he just doesn't. He's in this total state of disillusionment. So Bill starts to notice some very strange things going on. People who he knows who can contort their bodies in very weird ways. He sees his sister, basically with her whole body twisted the wrong way round, her upper portion facing backwards, and all of this weird sort of stuff that just doesn't feel like, it's normal to him. So essentially it turns out that his family are a different breed to him entirely. They're these alien humanoid things that can kind of combine their bodies in this kind of sexual way, and they're all sort of these alien monsters whose bodies can meld together, and it's kind of a sexual thing, and they're kind of not cannibalistic because they're not human, but they kind of feast on humans, and they get this sort of orgiastic reaction out of them, and all of this sort of thing. It's a pretty bizarre little ending that the movie has. I've probably done a terrible job of explaining the plot just there, but go and check the movie synopsis out or whatever if you want to hear a slightly better version. I mean, it's a pretty weird plot, I've got to say. Now, one of my favourite things about Society is the way that it addresses this weird thing with mental health, of this guy who is feeling this horrible disillusionment with the world around him and feels like he's different from everyone else and all of that sort of thing. And it says, actually, what if that's true? Because so much of mental health stuff is based on kind of teaching people that they're not as different as they think they are and that everything's okay, whereas this is a guy who has this awful feeling that he's just different, and he is, because he's not this, evil alien thing that, feeds off of, the weak and all that this sort of secret order of rich people who are actually aliens or whatever. So it's kind of cool that the movie delves into that. I do like that a lot. What I don't like so much about the movie is that it takes an awfully long time to climax. There's a lot of really cool kind of Twilight Zone-esque paranoia about the film and this whole mystery unfolding and this conspiracy that it's not just Bill who's part of, but other people he knows are kind of trying to piece this together, and they all keep mysteriously dying. So, that is cool, but there's just a lack of action for a lot of the film. And then it all comes in the last sort of 20 minutes where you finally get to see these sort of special effects of these people warping and becoming one and feasting on humans. And whilst all of that is really cool for the most part, there are some effects that I don't really care for as much, the head in the butt thing. But I do think that it should have been a little bit more peppered than that. It's this whole, and it's not that it's kind of a huge shock when it all happens, although it is a little bit, but it just all seems to come at once and then go, and it doesn't really have time to fester in your mind, so to speak. I don't know how they necessarily could have done it differently, maybe by having some sort of dual narrative, but I think they got a little bit caught up in trying to do that Twilight Zone-esque thing of, this guy who feels like an alien outsider, trying to work out why he feels this way. And for the most part, that really works. It just feels like the ending was kind of a little bit rushed together, if that makes sense. But overall, there's very little aside from that I can knock Society for. It's got a really cool, creepy atmosphere about this guy who is different and is trying to work out why exactly he feels this way, with everyone telling him it's just, you know, teenage disillusionment or whatever, and him finding out that actually he's right to feel different because everyone around him is a fucking alien, you know? So, like, overall, that's a really cool thing. The special effects, when it gets into the big climactic scene, are, for the most part, like I say, really good. There are some pretty twisted little ideas being thrown around in there. And the movie, just generally overall, looks really good, you know, from a kind of cinematography point of view, from a, you know, special effects point of view. The movie's got really good acting in it in general. I do feel like this movie is kind of worthy of the praise that it gets. This is kind of a cult favourite, you know. And whilst it's not among the best of my favourite cult movies, you know, in terms of cult horror, you know, the movies that don't get the, you know, mainstream press they deserve, you know, I'm a big fan of Maniac and things like that. I think Maniac's a superb movie, and that's kind of in the same pantheon as Society in terms of movies that horror fans love, but people outside of horror don't necessarily know about. And Society, I've got to say, it's not as good as something like Maniac to me, but I mean, it is still a really cool movie, I've got to say. Society gets an 8 out of 10 for being a very entertaining movie that holds a lot of really cool concepts. Like I say, I really enjoy the sort of Twilight Zone-esque mystery of the whole thing. I think that's a very cool thing that they've worked in really well. And overall, it's quite an enjoyable movie. I would definitely recommend checking out Society. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Luke Innes. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please check out the description for this video. You will find a link to my podcast. It's called Ironcast. It's all about music. I'm sure you'll really enjoy it. Also, check out the link to my Amazon wishlist. It has got a ton of stuff there that I really, really want, and I will probably get with my own money eventually. But if anyone wants to buy me anything off it, I promise I will talk about it on the channel. Which would be super, super cool of you to do. Please do like, comment and subscribe and all that good shit, and I'll see you next time.